What's up, Guiding Bolt fans? Welcome back to the channel. This is Nick, and today we're taking a look at challenge number 2 out of the Book of Challenges, Dungeon Rooms, Puzzles, and Traps. And today's challenge is another dungeon room. I know you're probably chomping at the bit for puzzles and traps. Don't worry, they're coming up, but I don't want to leave anything out because everything in this book is just so well done. I think it's just an excellent resource. If you're not familiar with it, it is a book from the 3.x era, and really everything in here is just meant to be kind of substituted or dropped into your existing campaign wherever you think it fits. So what we're doing is going through every one of the challenges one by one. I'm just going over I'm setting the tone, I guess, aka reading the room descriptions so you know what's going on. We're going over some of the mechanics that are used, and then I'm offering up suggestions on where I think it would fit in nicely with some of the 5e material. And I'm really focusing mainly on Lost Mine of Phandelver. My assumption is that most people watching these videos are probably starting out with Lost Mine of Phandelver. They're probably newer DMs and looking for ways to spice it up or just add content to it. And the reason that I came to that assessment is that the seasoned DM out there is probably well aware of this book already, probably already has it in their arsenal, and has used a lot of the material out of here. So, but I mean, if you haven't, awesome. Pick it up because it's a great resource. So this one is called Close Quarters. It's an EL or Encounter Level 2 challenge. And if we put on our 5e glasses, we can just read that as Challenge Rating 2. I'm just going to real quick here read this room description just so you know what the PCs are going to be up against. On the other side of this room, some straggly evergreen plants grow out of irregular heaps of earth. They surround what appears to be a small tunnel opening only a few feet in diameter. A few coins glitter among the dirt and weeds. A small dragon covered in green-black scales sits in the opening. Upon seeing you, it hisses. So that is a Wormling Green Dragon who's CR2, and that does actually match up with 5th edition. So the Wormling Green Dragon in 5th edition is also a CR2. And based on that room description, you probably guessed that this challenge is going to end up turning into a combat encounter. And it's actually a pretty short challenge. It only covers not even 2 pages, so we have this top section and then the bottom section down here. But really what sets this apart from other combat encounters is the fighting in cramped quarters. That's what I think really makes this encounter special, and really kind of sets it apart from just the typical combat encounter. And this isn't really a mechanic that I use a whole lot in my campaigns, and that goes along with squeezing as well, like larger characters squeezing into smaller areas, mainly because I forget about it, I think. But it doesn't seem to come up that often when I'm on the opposite side of the table either. But anyways, the way that I kind of see this playing out here is the PCs enter the room. The dragon, obviously, it hisses at them, and then it's going to use its breath weapon, which is actually suggested right here. That's kind of the first thing it does, is it lets off a blast of poison. And depending on the characters or the PC's levels, that might do a fair amount of damage and maybe even knock some of them down, because that's 66 points of damage. That's pretty rough, especially at lower levels. So it's going to basically use its breath weapon and then retreat into the tunnel. Now, depending on how much damage they took from that breath weapon, they probably aren't going to want to go into, dive into the hole and start chasing this thing down, because that's going to be on its terms or its turf. They're probably going to try to lure it out. And this all depends on what they come up with. I would let them lure it out as long as it has a chance to get back into the tunnel, and maybe let it come out for maybe a combat round, maybe 2, as long as they aren't doing too much damage to it. But you definitely want it to be able to retreat back into that tunnel so we can use this fighting in cramped quarters mechanic. So anyways, let's take a look at this fighting in cramped quarters. It says the narrow tunnel restricts most characters' ability to move and fight. Small characters can move at their normal speed, and they suffer no penalty in melee unless they wield medium-sized weapons. So, if it's a gnome walking through there with a dagger, like a gnome rogue or something, not going to be hindered. However, if it is a, Goliath barbarian, who probably can't even fit in there anyways, but should you decide to let them squeeze in there, they're going to be hard-pressed to actually do anything to that wormling in that tunnel. So, I mean, just picture this. Assuming that the barbarian is wielding a maul and he's squeezing through this tunnel. if any weapon that they're wielding that requires it to be actually swung to get any momentum to actually deal damage is not going to do anything to that. Like they could poke them with the blunt end of their hammer, and it's not going to do anything. Now, if they're crawling through with like a spear or a sword, something that they can actually pierce with, fine, that makes sense. But then they're going to be at disadvantage to actually make that attack. Now, as far as squeezing, these are obviously that's going to be difficult terrain going through here, so movement is going to be double. We can see here that the scale, this is each square is 5 feet, so treat that as 10 feet of movement for each one of the squares. And if it is a larger character, medium or large, I would say squeezing through there, then the Wyrmling, if somebody's behind him and they're trying to attack the Wyrmling, that Wyrmling is going to have cover. And we're going to actually take a look at the cover options and go over which one I think should be used in which scenario. Let's actually go ahead and hop over there right now just because we've been sitting on the same screen for a little while. So taking a look at, we're over on D&D Beyond now, looking at cover. So if there's a smaller character in the front, like that gnome rogue that we mentioned earlier, and somebody is behind them, then I would say that the Wyrmling is going to probably have a +2 bonus to its AC and Dex saves. And so it's going to have half cover. Now, if it's a medium-sized creature, I would say it's probably either going to have 3/4 cover, which is +5 bonus to AC and Dex, or possibly even total cover. And that I would use that to kind of scale the encounter depending on how difficult you want to make this. When we look at the stat block here, let's see here, where's it at? So the stat block for the Green Dragon Wyrmling, it's already got 17 AC, so you add +2 or +5 onto that, especially for lower level characters. This is going to make it a super difficult, it's already a difficult and potentially deadly encounter, depending on their level. So yeah, that's how I would play the kind of like squeezing and fighting in cramped quarters. And again, that's really what makes this fun. So I think I already mentioned this, but I would use that as kind of the first ambush spot there. It's probably going to strike out and then flee away, and I wouldn't let it disengage a whole lot. Maybe let them get off those opportunity attacks against it, just so they can maybe deal a little bit of damage while they're working their way through here. And then I would maybe add a couple more of these kind of like ambush spots throughout here, so that way it's either going to be a passive perception to pick it up, or they're going to have to be actively, like, scanning for this thing to make sure it's not hiding somewhere. Let's actually talk now about where I think this fits into the Lost Mine of Phandelver, and I probably already gave it away here, flipping through screens, but I think this fits nicely in Thunder Tree, and I would suggest or recommend substituting Venom Fang for that, because Venom Fang is a young green dragon, and depending on the level of your PCs, so let's say that I think at the end of Lost Mine of Phandelver, they're supposed to be level 5, so if you have 5 PCs that are level 5, this thing is CR 8, that's still going to be a hard to deadly challenge. And if they decide to come here sooner, if you're running it as kind of like a sandbox and they decide to, come here first, they're all going to get wiped out by Venom Fang if it's a CR8 dragon there. I mean, it obviously depends on how things play out. There's some other stuff that can happen if you've read through this or know about this. But anyways, let's take a look at the map real quick. So the Ruins of Thunder Tree, this is the area that Venom Fang inhabits. So I'd recommend, in this module, this is kind of like an open tower that he's able to go in and out of. I would just have this maybe be closed, and then there'd be like the right here is probably where those green bushes are. There's probably a little hole that kind of like leads off into the earth, and that's maybe, kind of the Wyrmling's lair. So that's how I would play that. And then as far as luring the PCs in, if they don't want to already take this thing out because of the massive damage it dealt to them with its breath weapon, you could spice things up by mentioning this right here. So Hugh is a +1 battle axe, and I would maybe, when they first enter the room, add it into like the room description. I'm just picturing the Wyrmling kind of treating Hugh as like its favorite bone. So he's just sitting there like chomping on this thing as they enter, and the PCs can make out like ancient dwarven ruins. Maybe it even has a slight glow to it. So they know if this thing is magical, they're probably going to want to try to get that thing away from that wormling. However, it hisses, it uses its breath weapon, it grabs Hugh and then retreats into the tunnel. And then when it comes back out, when they lure it out, it obviously doesn't have it. So I think that would be an excellent way to just kind of entice the PCs in after to kind of get your play out of this challenge. And let's see here. Was there anything else I wanted to talk about? I don't. Oh, there is actually. Let's see here. I just wanted to throw this up on the screen just so you had a chance to see it. I'm not going to actually read it out. Squeezing into a smaller space. So just in case you want to pause the video and just kind of read through that real quick, I'm sure most people already know, but this just talks about kind of how movement speed works while squeezing into smaller spaces. So I'll go ahead and end this there. I don't want this video to be too long. It is a short challenge. So if you have any questions, go ahead and toss it down below. Hopefully you found it helpful. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you in the next one.